GetABigStack.com.
We want to help you get a big stack in
Poker. Let's say you were dealt 6-7 on the button, pretty weak marginal hand.
Be whittled away and shipped out across the table.
Your favorite hand is 10-9.
You get 21 outs. Oh, you have to earn your money. Hey guys, this is Zeke with GetABigStack.com. I want to talk a little bit today about choosing the right hands and when and where to play them in what position and so on and so forth. Alright, it's pretty common knowledge that aces, I think everybody knows this, are obviously the best starting hand, and you want to play them aggressively in any position, whether that be in first position, which is going to be immediately following the button on the left, middle position, which is going to be obviously in the middle, or late position, which is on the button or behind the button. You want to either raise or re-raise. Generally speaking, there's other times where you want to trap and slow play your hand to extract more money, but that's advanced play. We'll talk about that later. So we've covered the big pairs briefly. Again, those big pairs are aces, kings, queens, jacks, and tens. Those are the biggest pairs obviously in the deck, and you want to play them aggressively from any position on the table, whether it be first position, middle, or late, or the button especially. So again, the reason why we raise with big pairs, hands like aces, kings, queens, jacks, tens, is because we want to weed out the field, because a lot of players will like to see a lot of flops, as do I, because I want to get in there with a lot of speculative hands, because when I hit the flop, I hit really strong and can get somebody's entire stack if I connect in the right fashion. This is a hand that's a great hand to play in most positions because it can make straights, flushes, etc. But again, with a big pair, you want hands like 7-8 suited, 9-10 suited, 4-5 suited, 5-6 suited, etc., to be weeded out, because those are the types of hands that will bust your big pairs if you let them in cheaply. So raise. Aggression is key with big pairs. And obviously we want to pay those big pairs in any position. Pretty common knowledge. Now with speculative hands like I just showed you, 7-8 suited, for instance, which is called a suited connector, again, 7-8 suited, you want to play these types of hands cautiously. You want to get in cheaply to the flop. You don't want to commit a lot of money, because oftentimes you'll miss and your money will go to waste and your value isn't that high if you don't connect. You have a 30% likelihood of making a pair on the flop, which even if you do make a pair, say for instance the flop comes ace, king, 8, and you've got 7-8, you've got a pair, but you've got bottom pair and you're likely beat, especially if there's a lot of action in front of you. So you want to play cautiously. You want to get into flops cheaply, hoping to hit 2 pair, straight, or a flush, or a hand of that nature. Trips, full house, which is rare of course. But hands like that, that'll make big money and strong enough to go to showdown. Hands that you want to avoid playing in any position, even on the button. I know it's tempting for players to play a lot of hands on the button because they misunderstand the power position. People assume that if they're on the button that they can play any hand they want, when in all reality that's not the case, because a lot of hands will connect in some fashion. Yes, maybe you'll make a pair, maybe even 2 pair, but by the river you're often drawn out and you lose your entire stack because you play foolishly. I've made these mistakes in the past. I know them all too well. Hands that you don't want to play include hands such as this. 7 deuce offsuit. The notorious 7 deuce. This hand is garbage, garbage, garbage. Do not play this hand in any position. You will kill yourself, you will lose all your money, and there's no value at all. You cannot make straights, flushes, or any hand big enough to go to showdown with. And if you do make a flush, it's going to be, well, either deuce high or 7 high, which is unlikely to be the winner. So avoid these hands at all costs. Other hands include 7-4 offsuit, 9-3 offsuit, 10 deuce offsuit. Generally speaking, any offsuit hand except for high cards like say Jack Queen offsuit, you want to be very reluctant to play, because they're not going to connect well enough with the flop often enough to be worth the money that you'd put in pre-flop. So avoid playing hands like that. 9-3, 7 deuce. Any hands that are spread apart fairly wide, like I said, 9-3, 7 deuce, you want to avoid those types of hands because they're not going to connect often enough to make you money in the long run. And we're not playing for the short term here now. A lot of players will play hands, speculative hands, say, for instance, 9 deuce suited, because one time a year ago they made a crazy flush and won an entire stack off of somebody, and because of that they've decided to play that hand over and over and over and over again, which proves to be terrible in the long run because you do not make money in the long run because your expected value is garbage. So throw those away at all costs. It will not make you money. So again, going over all that we've briefly talked about today. Aces, kings, queens, jacks, tens, big pairs, play them aggressively on any position on the table. Raise, re-raise. The ideal situation with aces or kings is to get your money all in pre-flop because you're a big favorite. Except for the unlikely case that you have kings and somebody has aces, then you're a big dog to win the hand. So that's a rare occurrence, so don't be afraid of that. A big thing to note is the position of which you're sitting. 9-10 is a great hand to play, for instance, or 8-9 suited. But if you notice here, in this situation, I would be the small blind because the button's here. And say I was dealt a hand like 7-10, which is it's a reasonable hand to play. It's sort of connected, it's suited. In early position, like the small blind or the big blind or thereafter, you want to avoid playing it because you're not going to be able to play it well after the flop because it's a very challenging hand because you don't connect it often enough to make it profitable. And when you do connect, you're often unsure of where you stand in the hand as far as where your opponents are holding because you're in early position, you're first to act, so avoid it, be cautiously. However, if I'm on the button and I'm dealt 7-10 suited, I almost always will play this hand because this hand is a goofy enough hand that it's easy to get away from on the flop if I completely miss. But when I connect, it makes tremendous amounts of money because it's an obscure type hand and people won't expect me to be holding 7 deuce if the flop comes, say, 7-7-10. That's an ideal situation. It's a rarity, but it's a good hand to play in late position. So the idea with position is, if you're in early position, you want to really, really tighten up your range of hands that you're willing to play. So in early position, play aces, obviously, kings, queens, ace, king, ace, queen, jack, queen, king, queen, all the really, really high cards and big pairs, especially suited cards that are high, king, queen suited, jack, queen suited, etc., etc. Play those always. In middle position, you can loosen up to play all those hands, including 9-10 suited, jack 10 suited, king, queen suited, even down to 8-9 suited. That's kind of on the lower range or lower end of the range for your starting hand selection. And as you get to the late position area, you can become a lot more loose in your selection of hands. Your range can become a little bit wider than where it was in early position, where it's here. In late position, you're around here, roughly. So 7 deuce, or 7-10, excuse me, suited, it becomes a playable hand. 9-10 suited, 8-10 suited. Those type of hands that are speculative become playable at that point. So play those, but play cautiously because they will often miss. Position is key, primarily because it enables you to see how players act in front of you. Aside from the way they bet and how they bet, you get to watch retells, how they react when the flop is dealt, etc., and you can focus more on watching your players that are to act in front of you as opposed to making up your own mind on what you're to do in the hand because you're in first position. So always play speculative hands in late position because there's power in late position. Obviously, we're going to avoid hands like 7 deuce offsuit, etc., but 9-10 suited, jack 10 suited, 8-9 suited, pocket 8s, pocket 9s, etc. are playable hands in late position.